Hi, I'm Kat. I create, teach, and write tutorials on chainmaille, and I'm with Fire Mountain Gems and Beads to teach you how to make the glistening bloom ring. This guy here. Let's get started. For the glistening bloom ring, you'll need a couple different materials here. You're going to need some large glass rings, some size 6 Miyuki seed beads, some large aluminum rings. You can use anodized aluminum or bright aluminum, whatever suits your fancy. And you'll need some medium-sized rings for the ring band. And the star of this one is actually the rubber rings. We're going to use these in a couple different spots. These tiny little rubber rings are important in this project because if you look on the back of this, you'll see that there's tiny little rubber rings along the back petals of the flower pattern, and those little tiny doubled rubber rings are what holds the flower in its shape. It keeps it tight and allows it to kind of curve just slightly so that it keeps that form of the flower. We use them there, and then we also use them in this ring band so that it gives it a little bit of stretch so that the ring is easy to get on and off. What's important to note about this one is that there's a couple things going on here. Start in the center and work our way out. And when we start in the center with this aluminum ring here, we are going to need to add 2 tiny rubber rings here, a glass ring, and if we turn it over, we'll notice on that very same ring is also a bead. So we have to add all of those things at once in order for this to get started. We repeat, and then we'll end up connecting all the petals together at the end. And as I flip the ring band here, we'll add the ring band at the very end. We're going to want to take that aluminum jump ring. I'm using the lighter color in the center. I'm also going to put on 2 of those tiny rubber rings. And then I'm going to put on the darker petal color, and I want those 2 tiny rubber rings to kind of sit behind, or in between I should say, the darker and the lighter color. And then I'm going to put the lighter color bead on the opposite side of those rubber rings, and then I can close this ring. Okay, so what we kind of have here again is the 2 rubber rings in the back, and then if we flipped it, we see that that bead is on the front side of the flower, and we're going to go ahead and keep going. Another aluminum, and this time if you want to put the bead first, that's fine, just as long as the beads are all on the same side of the flower. And then I put the darker color glass, and then I'll reposition my pliers, and I'll go ahead and put 2 of the rubber rings on the back side, and you'll notice the rubber rings are matching the same side there. Okay, so what you have now is 2 petals. 2 petals with the beads on the same side, and on the back again you're going to have the rubber rings. Let me adjust these here. The rubber rings in pairs on the back, and the pairs are important, by the way, for strength, and I would not use singles because these are really thin rings, rubber rings, so I would use 2 always on the back for strength on this one. Okay, let's continue. And as you can imagine, this project goes pretty fast. It's just 1 flower, and you could make this into a multi-flower necklace, earrings, pendant, whatever suits your fancy. bracelet. Almost there. We only have 2 more petals, and I'll show you what it looks like before we add the last one. One thing to note also is entering in your aluminum rings through the center in a way so that they don't intersect or cross any of the other aluminum rings. You have to make sure that they're not crossing any other rings or going through them, or else they won't fit. Okay, before we get to the last one, see what we have here. We put a total of 6, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll put our last one, and then we'll go ahead and connect all of those petals together with a different color ring and a different color glass bead. And on the 6th one, it does get a little bit tight in there. So to make room and show you here, you can see that it looks like there's almost no space to go ahead and put in a 6th one. So you kind of have to create the space without going through any other ones, any of the other aluminum rings. So you kind of have to move everything down, and if you do it just so, there's a tiny little bit of space there, and you dig it in there very carefully without crossing any of the other rings. There we go. And it will go in. Okay, close this last one, and then we can start to connect the petals. Okay, so there's your 6. And one thing to note, when you're going to connect the petals, you're going to have to pick up those little tiny rubber rings that we looked at in the back. Let me show you again. These little tiny rubber rings are going to get picked up, or basically woven through with the aluminum rings that you're adding, the anodized or regular aluminum, whatever you choose, and you add the bead at the same time as you connect the petals. All right, so we're switching colors here, and we're on with the black, and I like to come up through the back, making sure that I'm going through those 2 rubber rings all the way through the front of the petal, putting on the 2nd color bead. Whoop. 2nd color bead, turning my wrist so that I go down through the petal that's directly next to it. And I got to find those rubber rings and also go through those. So I kind of have to stretch them over just a tad to be able to fit onto that jump ring. And I have pretty good amount of room to still close this jump ring. So you can go ahead and close it and then continue our way around. And what it looks like with one, and it's pretty firm. You see it's not moving too much. The rubber rings also prevent it from moving backwards. So we have this kind of curved or bowed shape that we want, and we're going to continue around. All right, so go through one of the ones that you've already started here. This time you may want to go down through the front of the petal, sneak through those 2 rubber rings, sneak through those. Sneak through the other 2 rubber rings of the petal that it's next to, without pushing those 2 rubber rings through the glass. There we go. And then we can sneak our bead on here. There we go, and close it. So it doesn't matter if you open or close it, or I should say close the jump ring on the front or back side of the flower, just as long as you can get it through, and you should find plenty of room to close it. So this is what the back looks like now. We've got the rubber, 2 rubber, 2 rubber, 2 rubber. We've got the anodized aluminum through it. And then this is what the front looks like already. Okay, and it's going to continue to kind of curve in the direction that we want as we go around. right, going through the front, digging through those rubber rings, turning my wrist, getting the rubber rings in place, digging through those very carefully. There we go, and through the glass. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my second color bead on. And continue. We got only 3 more.
For these next 3, can you focus on being a little more in the center of the...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thin nose pliers are really helpful for this one because you're in a very tight squeeze to get everything closed up together here. And fingernails are also helpful to kind of dig those rubber rings out and get them onto where they're supposed to be, onto the jump ring. And another trick for this particular one and any of the weaves that are a little bit tighter is keeping your pliers in your hands at all times. If I were to pick up and put down my pliers multiple times, I would probably fairly easily lose my spot on where I'm working. I wouldn't have the same balance that I have where I'm trying to keep everything in my hands. Oops. There we go. Okay, I'm on the last one. Okay, so right now it's bowing this way. That's just because I closed the rings on the outside. All I have to do is just kind of push. Just push on the project, and there you go. I have a little flower. I have a flower there that's kind of curved upward, and it's very firm. It's really not moving much at all. The glass beads and the glass rings are pretty solid there. Okay, so adding a ring band. So there's one step that when you become a little bit more advanced, you can actually just go ahead and add it on at the same time. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to reopen one of the jump rings and add on the 2 rubber rings that we need to start the ring band. The reason I don't do it right away is because it's a little bit too many tiny little rubber rings going on at once for you to see how I'm closing the jump rings. But essentially what we want to do is just go ahead and open up 2 of the jump rings from the petals that are directly across from each other, all the way across from each other. And that will give you an even ring band. So on this one, it doesn't matter where you put it. So we're going to go ahead and decide which one we want to open. And if you can't see your closure, you just turn the ring around. Yep, there it is. And we're going to open up that guy just slightly. We don't need to open it far, maybe a little more. And very carefully, because things are fairly tight at this point, slide on 2 of those rubber rings. 2, and you can see that I have very tight area here to close this ring. So I put my pliers on top of those rubber rings once I have them on, and then go ahead and find the room by scrunching down on top of those rubber rings to go ahead and reclose that. Close it. Sure it's fully closed here. Okay, and then I have the start of the ring band. On the one side, it's kind of hanging down there. So we can go ahead and use one of our medium jump rings to go directly through those 2 hanging rubber rings. If I can get through them there. And as you're adding on for your ring band, you're going to want to add the 2, you can even add 3 rubber rings to every medium jump ring as you go. So for a size 7 ring size, which usually fits my middle finger, I do about 6 medium sized jump rings. I think actually I'm a 7.5 on my middle finger. Okay, so I have the 1 medium jump ring there. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue adding to the hanging rubber rings. And of course, as I said, we have to add 2 more every time. So I add 2 rubber rings and then go ahead and close it, and I just want to go around and complete the ring band. And in order for it to attach on the other side, I'm going to have to reopen that jump ring that connects the petals on the exact opposite side. But I will wait till I get there to do that. Okay, almost there. Okay, so I'm ready to go ahead and connect the ring band to the other side. And if I flatten this out here, we can see this. So I have 5 medium rings and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 of the tiny rubber rings. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this to the other side. We can go ahead and go through those 2 rubber rings with the medium jump ring and bring the entire ring band around. Make sure it's straight. We don't want it twisted. And allow those 2 rubber rings to match up from the ring band. Slide them on. And then we can go ahead and close that medium jump ring. And we have a finished ring band. And again, if the flower has curved outward or the way that you don't want it, you just kind of push on it to get it back up and concave that way. So we go ahead and just slide it on gently. You don't want to slide it a little roughly where you might twist the ring band as you put it on, but you can go ahead and have your bling. I consider it a pretty blingy ring myself. I imagine, you know, if you go ahead and do some of the brighter golds and reds and stuff like that, you can get a pretty bling ring here. And that's the Glistening Bloom ring. And there you have it. Go pick your colors out at firemountaingems.com and make it your own.